You're listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series.
Welcome to the studio, Supreme Court Judge David Ashton Lewis.
Oh, thank you, and welcome to everyone listening, and it's good to see you again.
Well, off the back of the last couple of weeks, we've had some feedback. We've had a number of people say that it was very informative. Some people, positive. Some people negative. Some people in the middle. That's just the way it works. But off the back of it, there was some very good points made on definitions. We all hear these terms, cancel culture, wokeism, and was refreshed to hear us go into some definitions. So we thought we might extend that a little bit more today and clarify those, because it is very important to understand the nuances. It's very important to understand what it is we're talking about or what it is you're potentially being accused of.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, it's like anything. Anyone listening, if you're going to make comment on things, you should have at least some understanding. And one of the problems in a lot of modern society now, particularly younger under 30-year-olds, they read something on social media that they agree with, that they're comfortable with, and do no research whatsoever to see if it was true or if it's been promoted in a rather corkscrewed way. So, yes, you're right. I mean, it is important.
That is the danger. Social media is quite dangerous, especially with influencers as well. You'll see a plethora of people who say that they're health experts or they're PTs or they're trainers, and they've done a Cert 3 or a Cert 4, and there is no nutritionalist or a degree qualified person in behind all of this. They might have heard something else second or third hand on social media. So it is very, very, very important not to just take things at face value.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and people holding themselves out as experts, you're entitled to do that, but you've got to have the backing to show it.
Yes.
You've got to produce peer-reviewed papers. Now, if I went to most people today and said, what's a peer-reviewed paper?
Yes, and I agree with you.
They would say, what? And then if you explained it and said, you're putting up something as your view or fact, you've got to be able to show that others equally as skilled as you have read it and said, look, that's well done, yes, I agree. Or some saying that's arrant nonsense.
Yes, absolutely.
And what we're now flooded with in many instances is arrant nonsense. And the worst part at the moment is the whole existence of Palestine and the existence of the Jewish people in that area, without any knowledge of the Jews were there 4,500 years ago. That is, the people who believed in the God of Abraham, the Yehudin, the Jew. That's where it comes from.
Sure. And
there were Arabs in and around that area as well. But they weren't Palestinian, they were Arabs. And really, if you look and do your research, the term Palestine came from the Roman occupation. It was Palestrina, and then really came to the fore after the First World War, when the British had the mandate from the League of Nations in that area. Arabs have lived there since time immemorial, or I should say Semitic people. The Arabic people are Semitic, and so are the Jews. They are Semitic.
Look, I'm a big fan of knowing and understanding the history that has come before us. It is very interesting to understand how we've got to today. But dealing with today doesn't mean that we need to focus on everything that has transpired in the past. Today is today. We have this same equation when we talk about our Indigenous culture and the land that has supposedly been stolen from them. Again, we're here today on the decisions that weren't made by us. They were made by people a gazillion years ago, and all we can do is deal with those decisions today and deal with them as equal parties.
Well, that's right. We might have done, a person can yell loud and longly from a hill about the terrible treatment of one group by another group and don't argue with it. If historically that's factually right, agree with it and say, well, we didn't do it and we're now trying to rectify it. So work with us rather than standing up and just looking for the blame game everywhere.
Look, I think that one of the comments that I remember hearing is the past is the past, but what does it matter? It's in the past. So let's just deal with today.
No, I think the past is important to know because remember I've used those words of Cicero and those words of Sir Edmund Burke, and his words are probably more to the point on this. If you don't know what happened in the past, you won't have a good understanding of what's happening now. Because so it means everything does have linkages with what went before. It's up to each generation to say, well, we're not going to make that mistake, or where that mistake was made, we think it should be rectified. But it doesn't mean that everyone now has to pay reparations to one group who none of us were alive then. So there's got to be more sense. So, okay.
Basically, it's learn the lessons of the past.
Learn the lessons.
Not
don't repeat
suffer
them.
in the decisions that were made of the past.
So possibly we should look at terms such as transgender, woke, cancel culture, DEI, which is diversity, equity and inclusion, feelings as opposed to fact, the rewriting of history to suit your narrative and to suit this term that I find it offensive. This is my truth. Well,
yes, that's
it might
right.
be your truth, but it's not factually true.
No, you're living in a
and
fallacy.
So what these things we're talking about, they all now put weight on, well, that's your truth, that's good. And then that leads to, in anywhere, trigger warnings and safe spaces.
All right, we're going to go through one by one.
Yeah,
trigger warnings, I had to ask you what you meant about trigger warnings, and I sort of get it to a point, but realistically, let's start with number one. It was transgender.
Now, since men first walked on the face of the earth, there has been men and women who have felt that they were born into the wrong body. And then you have what is known now euphemistically as the intersex. Now, intersex is what traditionally was the hermaphrodite, the person who was born with both gonads and both the genes of a woman. And many of them, surgeons or health specialists, would wait until that child was in puberty and decide whether to realign organs to fit more, because you would have a young male, say, who was growing breasts and who genitally showed that had both genitalia of a male and a female. And therefore, out of compassion and kindness, the whole idea was, let's try through psychiatric testing, psychological testing, find out what gender would be more comfortable for that male born or that female born. And if, am I talking about intersex? Young people will hear that term. Or hermaphrodites. I'm only talking about them on this aspect of it. And then there would be surgical intervention to remove one set of genitalia and certain areas gonadally, and gonads are that physical and chemical aspect of being a male or a female.
Sure.
And so that was kind and right. But now what's morphed is, but I'm not a hermaphrodite and I feel I should be a woman. Well, that shouldn't be ridiculed, but there should be, are you sure? Or is this due to stress? Or is it due now? You will get genuine people who will say, I dealt with some of them in law.
Sure.
I was born into the wrong gender. Well, the Swedes were light years in front in this of providing surgical and drug therapy and treatment to say, all right, although you're not a hermaphrodite, you are a complete male, but...
David, let me just slow you down.
Yes.
Isn't this a personal decision for the person that's involved? It's like being gay or a lesbian.
It is.
These are personal decisions
They are.
that you need to make. So
But
the issue with transgender or the term transgender...
So the issue is, it's really just that. I was born in the wrong gender. I want to change. And so they will undergo hormone replacement or hormone therapy. They will undergo everything. Now, what causes the problems with these things? And men, Europeans, Middle Eastern, we all have set up religions. We have set up a God, or a Christian will say, we didn't set God up, God exists. Well, then fine, if you believe that. But what the problem is, then people start saying, and this is God's opinion. And you say, no, look, just leave that, let it be. You just said it rightly, that transgender is an issue for the person. But now we've got this whole class of people turning up. I've seen it, and they look, you think, is it a male or a female? Because this person looks very feminine. No, not in a dress or anything like that. But then when speaking, has a very deep voice.
Sure.
Or whatever. And that then causes people to either react very conservatively, this is disgusting, this is awful, or at the other end, usually it's attributed to the left or the liberals or the progressives. No, let that person be what they want. And then it moves into what we're finally starting to stop, that these people, these men who look like a woman and say they are a woman, can't be changing in women's change rooms. I was reading a list, I won't go into it here, but I was reading a list of the offences committed by supposedly a woman in change rooms where they're in a women's change room.
Yeah, I agree.
And those offences are unacceptable.
Look, again, it is a difficult conversation because it can be, on one side it is a very personal issue, but then on the other side of the fence there needs to be some rules around it. They should not be able to change your gender and then go and compete as a male or a female or a female sport.
That seems to have been stopped.
And that needs to be stopped. Again, those sort of things, everybody needs to feel safe. Everybody has the right to their own privacy and their own... So
yes.
It is an issue. What, we're going to end up with 3 toilets now, male, female, and the bit in the middle.
Yes.
The issue, moreover, is, do you know what? It makes things very difficult when we're demanding our own space.
Oh, for sure. And look, it's all of these things that I'm going to touch on all basically require one thing, common courtesy.
And common sense to a point.
Well, common sense to a point. Because what might be sensible to you, Colin, another person would look and say, I don't know how he can think that.
I agree.
You know,
look,
I mean...
The funny thing that completely baffles me, and this may be a good way of pointing it out, in some states of America it is, look, abortion, it is absolutely terrible. We are killing a human before they are born.
Yep.
But fast forward 5 years, we can... make sure that there are enough guns on the street that someone can walk into a kindergarten and kill all of them.
Open fire. So look,
it's hypocritical.
We've really got to try to find the areas where just stay out of it. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, because these questions go beyond a question of faith. They go to the question of, a person saying, I was born in the wrong body, and I just want to be left alone to seek guidance and advice. The trouble is when we get our moral rules come in, and our moral in Western society is Judeo-Christian.
Sure.
Now, and I heard recently someone saying homosexuality has been around since men first appeared. out of the Garden of Eden, and there was
Happens in the animal kingdom.
well, I don't know about
Yeah.
that. If you say it, I'm not aware of it, but that, yes, loving your own gender. Now, people who are against homosexuality, usually it came out in things like it's against God's creation, or it's revolting. Men and women are meant to be together, not men and men, not women and women. You then say, who said that? And usually the answer will be, well, it's my belief and it comes from my faith. So while I want to respect your faith, but you've got to be careful that you don't impose your faith on someone who has no faith. But then someone will say, but we must have an orderly society. So we have to rely on something, and the majority of our laws are based on Judeo-Christian teachings and principles. So it's the challenge. So transgenderism is much more in focus now because our rules around discussion have lightened and changed, so people can now come forward and say, I've all my life fought with the fact that I was born into the wrong body. I can remember hearing that as a young barrister at times. So that's transgenderism. Let's go to woke.
Bear with me.
All
I was
right.
going to add something that came up in
Yes.
commentary a few years ago where as we started to hear the terms LGBTQI,
LGBTQI+.
TQI plus.
Yeah.
Okay, I always miss one somewhere in the middle there, and those sort of things. A younger person, I think they might have been a uni student, said, so why wasn't this an issue in your day?
Yeah,
And I said, because it was illegal.
yeah.
And you've heard of the closet, you've heard of those sort of things. Well, and it was interesting that they hadn't made the connection between
Yes.
now and
Yet,
then.
funnily enough, lesbianism was never illegal.
Sure.
Because Queen Victoria couldn't understand it. Because she had to approve all laws. Men doing what homosexuality was considered was easy for her and others to say, this is not right. But when they tried to explain to her advisors, women being intimate with other women, she couldn't understand
It's
it.
interesting that the fundamental of the law, I had no idea that she had to rubber stamp it. So
Oh,
she,
yes. Well, she was the monarch.
Yeah.
And like our governors in each state, Governor General. So, again, we do tend to, like what is pornography today would never have been even tolerated 30 and 40 years ago.
No.
I was at a judicial conference looking at this question, and some of the judges said what we called pornography in the 1950s and 60s is now just consensual sexual behaviour between a man and a woman.
Look, we've had these sort of discussions
Yeah.
in the past, especially I think we've used the example of the music here. We couldn't have a lyric that said making love, for
Yes.
instance sake. But when we were asking people who were in their 80s and 90s
Yeah.
what that meant to them in their day, and it was holding hands or spending time with
Walking
someone.
home from the dance.
So you fast forward to today and you say making love to anybody else, and it
Yes.
conjures a completely different picture.
It does, and it's because we move on. And so what was pornography 30 years ago is now explicit sexual activity.
Interesting that I remember reading when we were talking about freedom of speech
Yeah.
that pornography is one of the consequences of free speech, or one
Oh,
of
I
the
don't
negatives
know
of
that.
free speech, because it is a freedom.
Yeah, but you always make a good comment when we talk in these areas that freedom is not absolute.
No, it isn't.
And I think you're right. Look, we'll move to woke. Woke is an African-American term that came really from the inner city areas of New York, when one African-American man or woman would say to another, it's their form of saying, are you aware of this? And of course, the response was, yeah, I'm woke to it. It's a shortened form of I'm awake to it. I'm awake to
Sure.
this Black Lives Matter or whatever. I'm awake to it. So it's transitioned to become I'm woke to it. Now then, always can't trust man. Whenever you give him an inch, he takes a mile. So what woke has now become, we're modern, we are concerned about justice, fairness, equity. We're the woke. Anyone who doesn't agree with justice, fairness and equity, they're a fascist. And so woke
I love extreme comments.
We do, and
Yes.
humans tend to fall to extremes. So woke was simply a statement of saying, I'm aware of that. So that's it. But out of woke, I'm awoke to it, came this beast called cancel culture. Now, cancel culture is a person at a university or in a corporation or anywhere makes a statement that self-righteous or honest but a bit stiff or whatever people say, I don't like that. And
I'm offended by that.
Yeah, I'm offended by it. And in our day, it used to stop there. Well, I won't offend you any further. I'm sorry. Now it's moved to you should be terminated from your position. And I did mention recently an emeritus professor I know and I've known for over 64 years, brilliant legal mind, an eminent legal author in a major area of law in Australia, made a comment such as this. We know that women cannot take as much alcohol as men. Well, that became furor, and he was cancelled. He was dismissed from his professorship and everything when what he did, and this touches on the next thing I'll come to, feelings over fact, because it was women who complained and said that their feelings were hurt by that. Yet, now these are law students, and what they didn't know, there's been 3 decisions in the New South Wales Supreme Court, and I'm sure if we looked harder we'd find them in other courts, that have reflected what medical advice is, that for a man, 2 standard drinks in an evening. With a meal, for a woman, 1 standard drink. That's the same as saying women's capacity to digest, ingest, and deal with alcohol is much less. Yet he's lost his job over that.
So that is the example of cancel culture. And the issue is that it's a slippery slope. Where's the line drawn? Can we make the statement of females as a gender are genuinely less strong than men?
Yes.
Now, is that going to offend someone? Do I need to lose my job?
That has been said.
Yes.
Jobs have been lost over that. And that seems to have slipped away, though, because enough medical evidence came out and said you can be as concerned about equity, but women just don't have muscle development and the muscle depth that men do. And so I've seen reports on that because I had to deal with that in a case.
Yes.
And so that's where we've now moved to, feelings over fact. Those words have offended me, but they're not true. Well, that's irrelevant. I'm offended.
And I think that's the point. If you're having a conversation and someone was to say to you, I'm offended by what you have to say,
Yes.
The statement will be, I apologise for offending you, but these are the facts of the case that we're talking about right now, and you either choose to remove yourself from the conversation
Yes.
or leave yourself in it.
But someone responds to that, but it's not my truth. That statement, you can hear it everywhere. My truth is. Yes, but if your truth does not reflect factual, observable, proven, science or otherwise, then your truth is false and your truth is factually wrong. Now, out of that comes, you've offended me, and you can then move to you're a fascist or you're this or you're that. And what does that indicate? We can't
argue the
Well,
point.
we can't argue the point, but we can't take hearing things that we don't
like.
agree or we don't like.
Yes, and look, that's always an interesting one, isn't it?
We've only got a couple more to deal with, but I know we're on time, so let's save those for next week.
Perfect. Well, David Ashton Lewis, thank you very much for your time.
Well, as always, Colin, you're welcome, but don't offend me.
You've been listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series. Support local online content and become a financial supporter today at 4CRB.com.